So hello to everybody once again from the Cambridge Biomedical Campus. I'm Jill Wilson, and as we always say, wherever you are in the world today, welcome. The desire and the need for wellness is universal, and these webinars are not just for the 20,000 plus people working on the Cambridge Biomedical Campus. They are for everyone, so please feel free to always share the links far and wide. Today, I have great pleasure yet again in introducing Anne Strether. Anne is a trainer with Cambridgeshire, Peterborough and South Lincolnshire Mind, and Mind is our local mental health charity. She's a qualified teacher and has delivered training and managed and governed charities with a mental health focus. This is in Cambridgeshire and in Peterborough, and it's been for over 30 years. She's also worked in the field of visual impairment, HIV and child bereavement, as well as being a Samaritan's volunteer and trainer. Now, please put any questions as you think of them in the Q&A, and Anne will attempt to answer some of them after the presentation. So with no further ado, I will hand over to her. Welcome, Anne.
Thank you very much, Jill. And I'd like to say a real thank you to the Cambridge Biomedical Campus, to Jill in particular, but to you all for coming and joining us here this morning. So thank you very much indeed for being here. I'm just going to now share some slides to introduce ourselves and the course as well. So I hope you can all see these properly. So thank you very much indeed for coming today to this session on building self-esteem and confidence. I think this can go right to the heart, really, of who we are. Our lives are universally challenging, often very difficult. We juggle with so many things, and we can have so many knocks in life that, to be honest, do have a real impact on our self-esteem and then the confidence we have as a result. So I hope very much that today might be interesting, but also just provide some thoughts to to take on board, some of which to kind of mull over and which will be helpful. So indeed, thank you very much indeed for joining us today. I'm just going to introduce our CPSL Mind briefly in a moment, but I would also just like to say at this point as well that it's so lovely that you're here today, and I'm sure that you've very probably had a very busy day up to this moment. And sometimes when you just take the time to think about your mental health and your well-being, how you are, possibly after a very busy morning, it just stopping for a moment can catch us in quite unexpected ways, and sometimes can be quite overwhelming. So there's just a sort of request really to take account of your own kind of mental health and how you are, and to dip in and out if that would be helpful. Jill will put up my email address or make that available, and if it would be helpful to get in touch at the end, I'd be delighted to hear from you. So thank you. I'd just like to introduce very briefly who we are. So we work, as we say, in Cambridge and Peterborough across and South Lincolnshire, and we do two things really. We help people care for their mental health and well-being and maintaining that, and then support those with mental health difficulties to live as they would wish. And in addition, we campaign against the stigma that is still there around mental health, and and why we're particularly grateful for you for being here today, because it is talking about mental health that reduces that stigma and makes it easier for people to gain support. And we're an independent charity, but we're part of the wider network of National Mind, along with lots of other local minds. And this is just touches on some of the services that we offer for people who are in crisis, for people who are just maintaining their mental health individually, and then a range of groups as well, where people come together and support each other. So this is what I would like to look at today. So first of all, just thinking about what we might mean by self-esteem and our self-confidence, and then the causes of when that self-esteem might be lowered, might take a knock. And then to think about the signs which we might want to recognise in ourselves of when our self-esteem is lower, and then how that can impact on our mental health as well. And then in terms of sort of caring for our self-esteem, to look in particular around sort of self-talk, but how we sort of think ourselves and talk to ourselves, to challenge the negative thoughts that we have, and then other strategies as well. And then finally, some sources of some other help that I hope might be helpful to tuck away. So first of all, just thinking about, so we can address our low self-esteem when we're experiencing that, just to think perhaps what our self-esteem is and how that links to self-confidence. These are just taken from the National Mind website. So our self-esteem is how we perceive ourselves, how we see ourselves, and then as a result of that, how we value ourselves and sort of appreciate all that we have and all that we are. And we can think of this as self-confidence, but if our self-esteem is low, then we won't feel very confident inside ourselves. And so by sort of strengthening our self-esteem, then we may feel more confident about being in the world. So our self-esteem is based on our opinions and then our beliefs about itself. And sometimes those can feel difficult to change, but hopefully today we might just think about some ways in which we can inside ourselves sort of change and raise how we think about the people that we are. So these are things that are really dependent on our self-esteem. So just a few things to touch on, and these are things in a sense that what we want to, if we're not feeling very good about ourselves, these are some things that we would like to strengthen and to increase. So how we like and value ourselves as a person, that's really fundamental, how we do sort of privately think of ourselves. And then that has an impact on the decisions and being ability to make decisions and be assertive with things we care about. And it's recognizing our strengths that enable us to be assertive. Our self-esteem affects how able we feel to try new and difficult things. We need to have confidence for that. We need also to kind of almost be brave enough to show sort of kindness towards ourselves, to think about what we might need. And then critically to move on from mistakes without blaming ourselves. Everybody makes mistakes because we're people, we're not robots. And we need to, really to be able to, rather than allowing those to kind of damage ourselves as, in a sense, our self-esteem, to be able to say, we all make mistakes and I've learned from that and now to move on. And in practical terms, to take that time we need for ourselves, and that is partly around believing that we do matter and are good enough, and that we believe and that we deserve happiness, which we all do. So before we move on further, what I would like to do is just to stop sharing for a moment and to ask whether you'd be happy to share in the chat box what are the things that lower our self-esteem. What are the things that we might encounter in life that can cause low self-esteem? So if we can just set the scene, if you're happy to put some of those in the chat box, that would be really helpful. That would be lovely. Yes, criticism from others, definitely. How could that not affect our self-esteem? And bullying, which is terrible. Feeling rejected and unloved, very much so. And then practically redundancy, negative feedback. And then comparison with others, that's really unhelpful. Being made to feel silly. Negative self-talk, absolutely, and we're going to touch on that. Feeling not part of things, not valued, not part of a team, and that people don't support you. Ignored, wider relationship failures, failing things you've tried, that's really hard to pick up from that. Public criticism is terrible, and that's a really, really tough thing. Being aware of sort of lack of knowledge, and of course not everybody knows everything, but very much so. Relationship breakdown, that's absolutely fundamental. Yeah, level of pay, because other people are that, that status and pay, absolutely, other people do judge by you. Criticism completely. And favoritism is really, it's just there, isn't it? It just really chipping away at self-esteem. So Yeah, serious health issues very much, because it affects what you can do and what you want to do, certainly physical or mental health issues. Thank you so much. Yes, and your confidence very much. Thank you so much. So these are all such absolutely things that could absolutely affect your self-esteem and your confidence. And that last one, critically, how people think you should look. And that's the thing, isn't it? Is think you should look, and that's just that sort of judgment of that, and so much judgment within all of those things. And a lot of things or a number of the things you said are specifically work things, but many of them are life in general, absolutely all of life, and anything that one encounters in at work will impact the whole of life as well. So thank you so much indeed for and caring what people think. Thank you very much indeed for sharing all of those things, and I think they just instinctively are things that that can lower our self-esteem and then the confidence that we naturally feel, and they are things from outside that have that impact on us, and they have a real impact on our mental health as well. I'm just going to just touch on these because there's just a list here that all of which you shared in the chat. There's a couple of others. So being bullied, there's our history of childhood, all the problems about work, absolutely linked to financial housing problems, and all the stress overall and health problems you mentioned. The menopause is a really critical one, and that the links to that, to our self-esteem, our identity, and our mental health are immense. We run courses actually around the menopause, around that, and one's identity critically. Prejudice and discrimination, favoritism, all of those things really tough. And then relationship problems affect us so greatly. And then again, judgment from others or around how we feel we should look. So those were reflected so much in what you offered. And then just briefly to touch on self-esteem and our mental health. So our mental health, the World Health Organization says that health is the state of all of us. So it's physical, mental, social well-being. So it's not just not being ill, it's around our sense of well-being. And we need, everyone has mental health, and it's positive. If our mental health is positive, then we can cope with the stress of life and take part actively in the lives that we have and make contributions. Critically, that we all have mental health, and it should be a positive thing, and hopefully we can touch on that today. And the links between the two are very clear. So low self-esteem isn't a mental health sort of diagnosis, but so linked. And having our low self-esteem could cause us feel hopeless or worthless or blame ourselves unfairly. And they could be signs of a mental health problem or lead to diagnoses of something like depression or anxiety. So we need, if we can, to address our poor mental health and do what we can to boost it. So these are the signs we might see if we're avoiding challenges or opportunities, we're dependent on others, relying on others to make decisions, putting ourselves down and feeling isolated or more emotional. And these are things that if we step back and see in ourselves, we might recognize that our self-esteem isn't where we'd wish it to be, and that would affect our confidence. And these are things that all the things you put in the chat box will have a real impact on us and lead us to these signs in ourselves. So part of being kind to ourselves, I think, is to step back for a moment, see how we feel, look at if some of these signs are there, and we're not taking part in life or becoming emotional, becoming withdrawn or isolated or feeling self-critical, and then think, well, actually, you know, I am a really valued, lovely person, and how can I feel again and value myself and believe that I'm, you know, deserving of happiness. So if those signs are there, what can we do? What I would like to do now is to just play you, there's 3 minutes, and it's 3 minutes of video of people at Mind talking about low self-esteem and how it affects them. And in this, so it's a little bit longer video, 3 minutes, but they talk about how low self-esteem is affecting them. But then they move on to thinking about ways in which they can boost their self-esteem. So it kind of links to the second part of our session today, when we think about how we can improve and address and improve and raise our self-esteem. So I'm just going to share that, and hopefully all will be well. Oh, I'm so sorry. Let me try again. Lovely. Here we go.
Yeah, no, for me, teenage years, I think it becomes it took over almost. I mean, everyone's critical of themselves mostly, but it's at a point when it has taken over you, and it's almost not even you anymore that's criticising it. There's something else like fighting you on everything, every decision, every look, or, you know, it's almost like you'd put something on, you're like, you look stupid.
It was when my just way of thinking, the way that I am, when that started to take me off the path that I was going down, and then people started to wonder, like, well, actually, is he everything that we thought he was? Can he do everything that he was going to do? I know he's got 75% of the way there, but, you know, you can run a full race, but if you don't cross that line...
But did you put that pressure on yourself as well?
I think I did. I think I did.
I just don't think I'm interesting enough for people to want to be with me. Therefore, I'm not going to bother going out, and then no one invites you out. So therefore, no one wants to be with me. So I'm not going to go out, and that is just, yeah, terrible.
My low self-esteem, I think, worked to either exaggerate or cause, I'm not sure how far on the scale it goes, but to cause my depression.
There's a lack of just sort of social confidence, and I think I got to like my mid-20s, and I sort of looked back and thought, everybody else gets how to be social with each other, and I was only just doing that.
I was about 18, 19 when I first felt like actually I can talk to people.
Yeah.
And actually I'm quite good at it actually, but for ages I was like, I can't, I shouldn't, I mustn't.
Yeah.
It gets to a point where you've almost... It's almost like you've got this little enemy up here that's being critical of everything you're doing, and you can't do this, and you've just sort of... If you've given up, I think if you've just got to that point where you just say, I can't, there's just that feeling, as we've all said, of complete hopelessness.
I mean, I still maintain I'm quite lucky that I've managed to... It slipped, but I did catch it before it hit the ground, sort of thing. And now, again, awareness, being aware of it and trusting yourself.
Because your brain is so powerful that you can make yourself believe whatever you want to believe. If someone said something nice, just the smallest little compliment, I had to write it down. You could read that back when you were feeling bad and going, do you know what, there is some worth to me. I'm not this image of myself that I see when I look.
The nicest thing I've got at home is 5 or 6 little birthday cards or little notelets that people have written me, like messages out of the blue or for an occasion, and I read it back. I keep them in a drawer, and I look at them when I hit his days, or a few photos, little things. Have a good day.
You can't argue with it if it's right there. It's like, no, someone did say something though.
Lovely, thank you very much. So I'll just come back to the slides. There we go. So that was a video of a few people talking about how their self-esteem and confidence had really reached a very low point when there was that sort of critical sort of voice in their heads, where it was a vicious circle really of not being able to go out and you know, feeling isolated and the sort of gathering momentum. But then they began to just talk of a couple of things that made them kind of almost turn the corner and realize that actually there was the human mind is, in a sense, an amazing thing, and it is possible to really sort of improve your self-esteem. And they just touched on kind of keeping birthday cards or that sort of evidence really of how people loved them and valued them. And I think that's really quite an amazing thing to do. And if you just keep those sort of around and just remind yourself of that sort of warmth of feeling, and or emails of people who've appreciated you and sort of thanked you and so forth, then, you know, there are, that's the evidence and you can't argue with that. So just in terms of other ways of improving one's self-esteem, and I'd like to just think a little bit around this sort of self-talk, which isn't necessarily such a concrete thing. It's around really a conversation in the sense of how we feel about ourselves and sort of recognizing how we feel about ourselves. Again, stepping back and realizing that our self-esteem, the signs of self-esteem are there, of low self-esteem are there. We're avoiding things, we're finding it difficult to make decisions, relying on others, just not really having the confidence to believe in yourself and believe in all you value and what you can do. So thinking of that as a kind of self-talk in a way. So that it's the internal conversation we have with ourselves and how we feel about ourselves and how we value ourselves. And it has a big influence on how we feel and behave. You know, if you can think of situations where you maybe work or other situations where you don't feel particularly valued or included, or the feeling that others are kind of better than you in a sense. And it is very difficult then to feel kind of comfortable and assertive and strong on taking part. So our self-talk can wear down our self-confidence, but conversely, it can build and strengthen it. And by thinking about our self-esteem and caring for it, it can also strengthen it. That's stepping back and taking notice. And in one very sort of critical way, which I'd just like to think about, it can help us recognize the negative thoughts we do have, but actually addressing them. And so it is perhaps self-talk's the most important form of communication with all, because the person we're talking to is ourselves, and it can either really build and empower you. So just thinking about these negative thoughts. So just in terms of reframing those negative thoughts, so we all know perhaps one's a bit like this. So I haven't done enough here. I want to do this, but I'm not trying hard enough. They don't value me. They think I'm a terrible person. I can't do this. But actually, in a way, don't believe everything that you think. So it's said that we have about 6,000 thoughts a day, and most of which last a few seconds and then wash over us. However, we do often focus on and believe the most negative ones. It's a bit of a survival tactic because, you know, if you in very sort of evolutionary terms, you needed to sort out the problems in order to stay, in order to survive. But actually, we all do that. And if there's a situation which has gone incredibly well and real appreciation, then one suggestion on something we could do better, and that is the one we remember and focus on. So actually, if we consciously thought about all the positive stuff, perhaps we could choose to do that and wonder what might happen. Another way of thinking about this particular thing is that if there is a recurring negative thought you have, or sort of judgment that you have, and that I'm not sort of good enough, or my body image isn't good enough, or I'm not qualified to do this, somebody else could do it better. An interesting question is, I think, what would you say to a friend or maybe a colleague if they express those thoughts? And actually, it is quite often, I think, that one's judgment of others is much kinder than the judgment one has about oneself. So it is quite an interesting way of framing it. If a friend outside work or a colleague in work said to you, I'm not good enough, I don't look the way I should, I can't do this, you know, what would you say? And then I think there's something about evidence as well, that these thoughts aren't necessarily true, and maybe touches back a little bit on the suggestions the group had around keeping some sort of lovely evidence of the things, appreciative emails or cards that people said, nice things that people have said about you, and actually just keeping those because they are very precious. But just thinking here about the recurring negative thought or the judgments we have, and how we might be able to go ahead and change those by, you know, the power of our mind to do that. So what I would like to do now is just to show a very short video. This is just a minute long, and this is an NHS video that they put forward as part of their they have a series of lovely resources around improving mental health, and this is just one of them around a sort of challenging negative thoughts. So if you forgive me, I just need to change the videos around from the other one. It's lovely. And then coming back to Zoom and sharing the correct one. So this is around reframing the sort of negative thoughts that we might have. There we go.
And behaviours continually affect each other, and it's easy to develop negative patterns where unhelpful thoughts lead to unhelpful feelings and actions. Sometimes this can become a vicious cycle. Many of us don't realise that we can influence this process and that this can improve our mental health. The best way to deal with these unhelpful thoughts is to recognise them, challenge them, and see if you can replace them. Some people call this the catch it, check it, change it approach. With practice, this can help us look at perceived problems from a different perspective. For example, you might be worried about an important task you have to do at work, convinced it will go wrong and everyone will think you're a failure. Rather than immediately accepting this thought and feeling even worse, take a moment to catch it and check it. Ask yourself whether there's good evidence for it, or if there are other explanations. Try thinking about what you would say to a friend who was thinking this way. Finally, see if you can change the thought for a more positive one. Maybe, I'm prepared, I've put a lot of work in, and I'm going to do my best. Sometimes you will be able to change the thought to a positive one, but don't worry when at other times you can't. There are no right or wrong answers. It's about learning to think more flexibly and be more in control. And seeing if you can change it. With practice, you can help break the negative cycle.
Lovely, thank you very much. So just coming back to the slides momentarily. There we go. I think that's really, that there were some real lovely suggestions in that. So there was the basic things of how we can...
Feeling stress is a part of life, but it doesn't have to...
I'm so sorry. I do apologise. There we go. We'll get rid of that one. Let's come back to... there we go. There we go. So just to recap briefly on the video, I think there were some really helpful things there, which is around understanding that we do have the ability and the mind ability to step back and to see how we're thinking about things, and to check our thoughts if they're negative ones, and to challenge them and think about what the evidence is and to change it. And there was very much a work-based example there of how there might be something at work that you'd need to do, and all those very natural feelings of somebody else might be better or you're not good enough and so on. But actually the truth is that you were chosen to do that because you're the best person to do that. But the same thing, I think, can happen, we can apply to all sorts of situations, social situations and family situations as well, outside of work too. So just to recap on self-esteem, and then just to touch on confidence following this very briefly. So checking negative thoughts and thinking about those are one way of boosting our self-esteem, but also there are a number of other things as well, I think, that we can do, again, by stepping back and by noticing, and by you know, valuing ourselves and really focusing on all the positive things, which is a good thing to do. So focusing on the small wins and things that we achieve and things that we do, just in some way of noting them, and whether it's just saying to yourself, yep, I did that, whether it's ticking off a to-do list, but actually just stopping for a moment and feeling, you know, a sense of achievement that you've done something important and that you've won something, achieved something good. And again, celebrating the successes that you have. It might be by saying, right, I've done that, so now I'm going to go and do this for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, whatever it is. Again, it might be just saying to yourself, yes, I did that, I did it well, and I've done that. And that's a really good starting point for something else. But really noticing the positives and the successes and the achievements. And accepting compliments, which is something that's not all of us are very good at. We try to, you know, there's sometimes an automatic reaction if somebody says something nice about us or appreciates something that we've done, to kind of minimize it or put it in the context or say it's part of the team, all of these things that are true. But actually there is something as well about graciously saying thank you and appreciating the compliment and acknowledging it, perhaps acknowledging it, you know, thanking the person, and rather than trying to brush it aside or wave it away, to actually internally say, yes, I was appreciated because I did something well. I think this is a big one, isn't it? The practice sort of saying no if it's appropriate to do so, and the being assertive. And we do need to have a strong sense of self-esteem, I think, to be able to feel brave enough or just sort of have the ability really to say no sometimes when it's the right thing to do. And I think there's a number of ways to sort of think about that. And it is quite possible without wanting to, or often you want to help the person because we're sort of caring people clearly, and you don't like to hurt them and cause them distress, or you don't want, you know, people to feel that you're being unhelpful or not understanding. So it's actually taking a mindful moment to say, is this a reasonable request? And if it is, then you can say yes. And if it isn't a reasonable request, is there some way that you can still help or offer to support in a measured and a reasonable way? So, for example, saying, I would like to do this, but I'll need more time in order to do it. Or I'm not able to do that, but I'll be glad to support you in doing so. Or I'm not able to do all of that, but I can do this part. So some way in which you're setting the boundaries for yourself, and actually people respect that, or very often do respect that, and will appreciate that it's the right thing to do. It is hard, and you know, often, particularly perhaps in a work situation, because the expectations are there and you don't want to be seen as unhelpful, or at home because you're really caring about the people. But just sometimes, and if you begin to put those boundaries in place simply by stepping back for a moment and saying, is that a reasonable request, and what is reasonable, then it's a great thing to do. And if you've kind of done it once, you can do it again, and just build the skill really. Again, trying to avoid comparing ourselves to others, and we tend to not compare, just compare ourselves to perhaps the one person who, or a couple of people who we do find a bit intimidating, or feel that better to ourselves. But actually, as our self-esteem can grow and our negative thoughts can be challenged, then perhaps the comparison with others may seem less significant and less overwhelming. And there's something about focusing on positive relationships and positive things. So there are, and if one again steps back and really thinks about it, there are relationships that we find very sustaining, and actually people who leave us feeling good about ourselves. And there are others whom less so, to be honest. And it's not a question of blocking those people out of our lives, because often that's not possible. But if there is some way in which can kind of minimize that impact on some ways, and boost and perhaps boost the time or the context that we have with those who feel who sustain us rather than drain us, then that just shifts the balance a little way. And it's actually about stepping back and realizing that, and seeing that that's actually in the nature of the other people in a sense, not faults in ourselves. So actually kind of crafting our time and the time and impact of others. And then finally showing ourselves self-compassion, and that is around believing that we matter and that time for ourselves matters, and that actually for caring for others we need to care for ourselves first and foremost. And we talk of the different things that we need for ourselves to connect with others, to have time to pursue the things that interest us, that we can become absorbed in, so we can appreciate nature, just the things that we know are for ourselves, and it's completely individual. Other things that boost our well-being and make us feel good for ourselves. And it's about stepping back and saying, what do I need? And what are the things that make me feel good about life? And if you're feeling sort of sad or upset, you know, really just taking the time to address those thoughts and try and put them into context, and then do something that will make you feel good about yourself. And again, this is just an exercise just to keep in mind, really, but actually, what are just 2 or 3 things that you like and value about yourself? Stepping aside time to think of things that you'd like about yourself and you absolutely value about yourself as a person, your values, your beliefs, the person you are. And then also sort of alongside 2 or 3 skills that you have, and you'll have so many ones that you may not come to mind instantly, but you realize that you have. So the things that you like and value about yourself and the skills that you have as well. So just briefly, if one is able to step aside and think about one's self-esteem and take steps to increase it, that will lead to the increasing confidence that we have to address the world, really. And I think a critical thing here is that we may well not be able to affect the behavior of others. You know, if we are at work and there's favoritism towards others, or we're being criticized, all these very unfair things, or things that have happened to us in the past as well, that have knocked our self-esteem. So these situations in which we're placed that are not of our making, it may be that we're not able to change those, or not very significantly. You know, we don't choose the people we work with, we don't choose our family by and large, and so much of what we do is kind of where we find ourselves, and that we may be in unfair situations that knock our confidence. So I think sometimes all we can do is to build up sort of internally and privately and individually, to do the things just we've talked about, to boost our self-esteem, to think about the value of the person we are, and to sort of inside, you know, privately build our confidence in ourselves, and really allow all the skills and the values that we have to shine. And if in terms of our confidence, then in how we are in the world, then having sort of improved our self-esteem, then it may be that just sort of gradually doing the things that we find difficult may be a way of gaining confidence. So if things are hard, we may avoid them, and this kind of gradual exposure is just the opposite. So if there's something that you find particularly difficult, whatever that may be, just exposing yourself to gradually doing something small that will lead up to it, just sort of stepping back, thinking what the situation is, doing, you know, a small part towards it, so then how you are involved in the situation can increase, whatever that may be. And then as your self-esteem increases and you've got sort of practice in that situation, then you can kind of rise to the occasion a bit more and be able to cope and feel confident. I'm not going to show this video, you can find it on YouTube. It's actually about a father doing self-affirmation with his little girl before she goes to school. And essentially what he's doing is that you can't see it in the video, but they're standing in front of a mirror. So you can see how that would work. And he is kind of saying, repeat after me. And then she's doing that. And she's really enjoying it. So it's a dad and daughter affirmations. So he's saying, you know, I'm a lovely person, and then she says, I'm a lovely person, and he says, I'm kind, and to others, and she says, I'm kind to others, and then he says, you know, I'm smart and I'm really able to, I do all these things, And she repeats it, and others love me too. So there's just something in that, I think, in saying, albeit out loud or not, or in front of a mirror or not, but actually just these values and skills that you have, and really maybe writing them down or really consciously thinking about them, and just those affirmations can be very, very powerful, actually, because we are so used to doing ourselves down. Oh, sorry, I think I'm going to get, there we go. So just to, before we just touch on a couple of sources of support, there's just things around feeling confident. So, with our self-esteem, sort of looking at that and the confidence that follows on from that. And is there something that you would like to feel more confident in? Is there something, when you step back and think about it, it's a situation where you don't find easy, you want to feel more confident in it? And then also, what's one small step that we could take towards doing that today? That sort of graded confidence, when if we thought about it coming up, rather than avoiding it and just going into very natural denial, actually thinking about something, sort of embracing it, one small thing towards that. Lovely. What I'd like to do now is just to touch on a couple of sources of support, and the slides will be there. So just some general ones, and then if you happen to be within Cambridge and Peterborough, there are a couple of things there as well. So just to touch on these very briefly. So CPSL Mind, we have some wellbeing services, some that you can just drop into, and peer support groups. And if you look at our website, they're there. If your self-esteem really is quite low, then the Samaritans are someone who are there. They're national and there to talk to. And you may be feeling suicidal, you may not be. That doesn't matter. Of course it matters. They are happy to take every call that comes, and they are there to listen and to help you think aloud, and to talk about the things that are affecting you, and to come to your kind of own thoughts and conclusions. And that's day and night too. It may be, if you are feeling that you're suffering from anxiety and depression, that you do need to go, that going to see a GP would be helpful. And obviously, that's not quite as easy, but still seeing a GP. And social prescribers are there as a wonderful service to support people in taking part in services to boost self-esteem. The suicide safety website, just to coming back to the Samaritan Thought as well, that's a fantastic one. It's a very clinically approved international website with thoughts around staying safe and supporting others and keeping safe oneself around feeling suicidal. It's a fantastic website. It's very gentle. It's lovely. It's got lots of really wonderful suggestions and videos and thoughts around suicide safety. And then clearly, if they're in a real crisis, or 999 and going to A&E, or calling 111 is then an option too in a real crisis. And if someone is very suicidal and has put a plan in action there, just keep that as the as the kind of source of support that's there. If you happen to be in Cambridge and Peterborough, there are this absolutely lovely websites called How Are You, H-A-Y, hey, how are you? Right across all districts, Cambridge and Peterborough, with a whole massive range of community activities that boost well-being, boost self-esteem, boost self-confidence. Really lovely in every geography, and it's all kept very updated. Similarly, in this area, there's Keep Your Head's information on mental health and well-being, a huge amount of information there. Excuse me, but the NHS as well. Websites have so much there as well. You can, in Cambridge and Peterborough, self-refer to NHS, to the NHS for low to medium depression or anxiety. And if in this part of the world, Cambridge and Peterborough, if there's a crisis and you phone 111, then you may be referred to option 2, which is attending the sanctuary at CPSL Mind in Cambridge, or Peterborough in our 2 offices there. So thank you very much indeed. We'll just stop in just a second or two for any questions, which I'll try my best to answer. Thank you again, for attending and being here. And just to reflect really that self-esteem, our self-esteem, and then our confidence to act in the world as we would wish, can be very fragile, and there's so many things that knock us. But then just by, I hope, by stepping back and understanding and valuing ourselves, recognizing how we might have so low self-esteem, can actually, that sort of self-reflection can really help do those things to check our thoughts and boost the evidence that we know is there of how valued we are as people and all the skills that we have. So thank you very much indeed. I will stop sharing now and hand back to Jill. You know, thank you very much for being here at this part.
Thank you, Anne. Again, another really interesting and informative webinar. I'm just looking to see if we have any Q&A. We don't actually. It looks like you've covered absolutely everything that everybody wants to know, Anne. Although I know we had some questions in prior that you might like to address.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you. Yes, I'll be very, very happy to do that. The first, there was a question around supporting younger people as well. And so I just wanted to touch on that as best I can, really. Just to say that hopefully some of the things that we talked about in the webinar just now might be appropriate for, you know, talking to younger people. I think the question referred to teenagers, so hopefully that might be the case. If you are in Cambridge and Peterborough, there are Centre 33 is a fantastic organisation that supports teenagers age group. If not, you know, National Mind might well be, if you're in the UK, a very good source of signposting. So I hope that's okay. The second question was around, you know, the setbacks from managers and at work, and that's so tough because that's very difficult to change. So I think really all I think other than, you know, processes, work, HR and so forth, is around somehow if we can boost our own internal, privately, our self-esteem, that may be the way in which one can address that. I hope that slightly answered that question. There was another question around the menopause and I think HRT as well. Just around HRT, that's something that many women use, find supportive, but that is something absolutely to talk to a doctor and find out whether it's right for you. That is definitely a conversation with a GP or medical practitioner. But I think it's such a helpful thing to raise because the menopause has an enormous impact and knock on one's self-esteem and sense of identity in just so many linked ways, and our roles and our you know, is around our ability to have children and how we see ourselves and aging. All the symptoms as well lead one to exhausting. There are just so many things around the menopause. We do actually offer training around the menopause. Perhaps that might be of interest. But that is a real one. And I think the thing about menopause, sorry, finally, is you know, there's such a stigma and it's difficult to talk about it. And if one is able to talk to others, that's a really powerful thing to do.
Thank you, Anne. We've got a question here. What type of peer groups does CPSL offer? Are these virtual groups?
The answer is the ones where, so there are some specific ones around well-being where you can, it would be important there just to contact CPSL Mind because there is a bit of first come, first serve with those. However, there are good mood cafes which meet right across Cambridge and Peterborough, where you can just turn up, meet other people. They're not facilitators as such, but there'll be somebody to welcome you and make sure you have a drink and someone to talk to. So on our website, it's got where all of those are, but they meet weekly and you don't need to book or give details or anything like that. And we also have calm spaces around the menopause, calm spaces around mindfulness as well. And those again are some in person, but also online as well, if you'd like to, if you're interested in that.
And those calm spaces can actually help with the menopause, Anne. So I don't think it was such a faux pas. And interestingly, we've got a question here. How can we get involved to help others around the menopause? I'm a big fan of it being talked about more. And we are too at the Cambridge Biomedical Campus Wellness Campaign. We've done a lot on the menopause and the videos are on the Cambridge Biomedical Campus YouTube channel. We are continuing to do stuff on the menopause menopause cafes, we're trying to spread those far and wide across the campus and open to all. So if you keep an eye on the CBC Eventbrite page, you will be notified. And if you've actually, when registering for this event, ticked that we can stay in touch with you, as soon as we are launching anything else, you will get to know, and that will include webinars, and it will also include the menopause cafes. And they've been very, very popular on campus, so we're hoping to get those going again.
Fantastic. There was just one comment came up in the chat actually, which was around the cost of the training. So I'm just sort of just mentioned that. Absolutely. I mean, the cost, that £300, as if from CPSO Mind, as if we deliver sessions, you know, to companies. So that's collected, you know, to a company as a whole. That's what it is. But
and this is what we're doing for you. We are bringing Mind in and running these menopause, or we are running literally all the webinars, which include menopause, for people on the biomedical campus and beyond. So is anything available to campus members already? Yes, absolutely, lots. Just go to the Cambridge Biomedical Campus YouTube channel and you will see all the stuff we've done on the menopause previously. And as I've just said, stay in touch with the CBC Eventbrite page and you will see what we've got coming up on the menopause. And if you join our mailing list, we will let you know what we've got coming up on the menopause. And none of this is restricted to people who work on the biomedical campus. It's for everybody.
That's
so
fantastic.
we've had another comment here. I really enjoyed our face-to-face sessions at the Menopause Cafe, such a safe place to chat and meet others. And yes, I've got a meeting with CUH with Adam Brooks later this week to discuss running plenty more menopause cafes with them, and we want to run them with the rest of our partners on the site as well. So just keep it, as long as you're on our mailing list, you'll get to know, but also we'll ask the comms managers to send out information on the menopause cafes and anything else we're doing on the menopause. If you want something specific on the menopause, contact me through Eventbrite, the CBC page on Eventbrite. Just press contact organizer and the emails will come through to me, because we'd love to know what you want and what you think and what you're not getting enough of. We really do want your comments. Sorry,
Jill, I'm so sorry, and that's absolutely fantastic, and that's so inspirational, everything that you've said. I mean, that's just absolutely, you know, what a positive kind of way approach. I was just very conscious, forgive me, there was also a question that came through around body dysmorphia as well, and I realised I hadn't touched on that one. That was a question that came through originally, and just to say that I wouldn't, you know, in this context, be able to touch on something that would need a very full on, I mean, such a helpful question, but would need, I think, quite a full answer. And perhaps I might suggest that if you possibly CPSO Mind or the National Mind Info line might well be able to suggest helpful sources of support, if that's okay. And that's the case for, you know, generally that's the National Mind Info line is very helpful, and CPSO Mind also. So thank you for the question. I hope that's okay.
We've got quite a few more comments coming in, and we've got time to cover them. I have got a comment, which now so many more comments have come in, I've lost it, asking for more information. I've put my email address in the chat, so pick that up, drop me an email directly, and I'll try and help with that. We've got a question here. Do you think it's helpful to try to get to the root of a lack of confidence, or is it more important to find ways of tackling it? That's an interesting one, isn't it, Anne?
It's a really interesting question. Absolutely. I think just always, if one is able to step back a little, be a little bit mindful, think about how you feel, and just in these very general ways to address one's low self-esteem and boost one's confidence in these ways, just very sort of simple, sort of in concept, although not in simple to carry out necessarily, of boosting one's well-being and how one feels. So yes, I think that's certainly could be helpful. I think in terms of the cause of one's self-esteem, that is very individual, if that's all right, just to say, really, depending on what it is, and who might be able to offer some specific support around that self-esteem, around that. I mean, it might be possible that some talking therapy might well be helpful. Again, there was the applying for sort of IAPT and CBT that one can access. Yes, so often, I mean, talking therapy is just very, very helpful. So that's, I think, all I perhaps can say there. What I also just want to say is, I think Jill will kindly put my email address at the end as well. So if anybody wants to come back, you know, with any questions not answered or not answered very helpfully or fully, you know, please do send me an email and I'll be delighted to hear from you.
I did that earlier, Anne, but what I'm going to do
you.
is copy it and put it back in the chat for those who might have come later. Just doing that now, send that to everyone.
Thank you. Lovely, thanks. That's lovely.
I'm just seeing if we've got any more, because we've got so many comments in here. I just don't want to have missed anything. I think actually, despite all of this, we have actually managed to cover it. So do we have any more questions? We've got one in the Q&A. You're really keeping us on our toes, flicking between the Q&A and the chat.
Fantastic. Jill, do you think while you're looking at that, I could just pop up our evaluation code? Would that be all right?
Yes, yeah, the Q&A doesn't actually relate directly to this, so
that would be really kind. There's a QR code there if anyone would be happy to just give a very short feedback, and if I could just leave that up there for a couple of minutes, and obviously any other questions as well, I'll be if you don't mind that being up, I'm very happy to answer for the last couple of minutes.
I just want to say a huge thanks again to you, Anne, for another amazing, very informative webinar. For those of you who are interested, our next CBC Wellness Campaign events are on Eventbrite. Just Google CBC Wellness Campaign Eventbrite and it should come up, a list of our events. Keep returning to see what we've got on next. Lovely to have seen so many of you attending again today. Thank you very much, and thank you to Anne. Goodbye.